everyone. I'm Stephanie Stahl, General Manager with the Content Marketing Institute, and I am chatting today with Harry Jackson. He's a product manager at InMotion Hosting, and we're going to talk a little bit today about hosting content on websites and the impact on performance and a few other things. I've got a few questions for you, Harry, if you're ready, but first, welcome and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, sure. First, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And as you said, I'm the products manager at InMotion Hosting. I've been here for about 9 years now. I'm also a recently retired team rep for the Make.WordPress community on the WordPress project. I retired a couple months ago. I was a team rep for a little over 2 years, and I really enjoy doing what I can to make websites faster and WordPress itself.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's start with what are the top options for hosting and how do they differ? Can you give us the lay of the land there?
Sure. Yeah. These days in the hosting industry, the types of plans, it can be pretty confusing for somebody that's new to the space. So basically, when you decide your host, you're looking at a varying number of options, but it can be fundamentally broke down into three. You have shared hosting, VPS hosting, and dedicated hosting. So I'm going to use a housing analogy to help explain it as best as possible. In a nutshell, shared hosting is much like renting an apartment. You share resources like your water, your parking lot, things like that. So for your website, it could mean slow loading times if your neighbors get a little noisy, i.e., too many people taking up the parking spots, so you have to find somewhere else to park. With shared hosting, the resources are shared, so that's why it's labeled that way. And in doing so, the way the queues stack up on a server, your request could be a little late to the party answering for the visitor. And then you have VPS hosting. That's kind of like renting a townhouse or living in one. You have your own dedicated space, but there are still some resources you share. Parking lot being a great example of that. You will see improved performance with VPS and shorter loading times, and you're less likely to have a neighbor's usage bother you. And then finally, you have dedicated hosting, and that's where you have your own single home family. It's just your house. The resources are all yours. You're not sharing them with anybody. Now, it does make this the most secure option, but with that, it's also the most expensive one. And dedicated hosting is a great option for really large websites with a lot of traffic, and also that value uptime and making sure that your website doesn't go down. So among these options, you also have WordPress hosting, and you can find that in different flavors across all three of those variant types of hosting. All the resources and spaces are usually yours with WordPress hosting, and they're optimized to run WordPress sites at peak performance. The resources are also scalable and dedicated to serve and dynamic content fast.
Love it. The house analogy, that's the best one I've ever heard. That's fantastic. Okay, let's talk then about the impact on content's potential to perform well or to perform at its best.
Yeah, so great question. When you use shared hosting for a WordPress site, you are sharing those resources with others. So if your neighbor suddenly gets a instant burst of traffic, that could cause your request to go a little bit slower than they normally do. Instead, you want to make sure you look for hosting that has dedicated RAM and CPU, or like a virtual private environment, or even dedicated hosting. For WordPress, you'll also want a host that leverages server-side caching, has PHP workers that you can use to help deliver your content. You also want reverse proxies and other technologies to serve your dynamic content fast. So you want the site for your website visitors to load as fast as possible, and also be fast on the back end where you're managing your site and content as well.
Let's stick with the conversation here on WordPress specifically. What are the advantages of managed hosting when it comes to these sort of plug and play content management systems like WordPress?
Well, managed hosting, in a nutshell, it allows users to spend their time on their business and not dealing with the technical matters like updating their server or their operating system. People are building websites to promote their business, not to learn how to become a sysadmin. And with security becoming an ever-growing concern, managing your own server and keeping it up to date while also trying to run your business can be an overwhelming task pretty quickly. And as WordPress grows in popularity, the demand for specialized and managed hosting has also grown with it. And this has created competition that in turn has created some really cool innovation in the WordPress space specifically, and in the hosting industry in general. WordPress is getting easier to use, more secure, and faster. And that is a huge advantage for users of the platform.
Awesome. Okay, how can WordPress help marketers, and this is a final question for you, how can WordPress help marketers improve their use of SEO?
Well, first, WordPress has a clear and transparent roadmap. You can always stay in tune with what's coming in down the line. So that in itself helps to know how the software is evolving. WordPress also offers thousands of themes that are SEO and mobile friendly ready. And out of the box, you can use permalinks, and that gives your site an easy to use structure, and it follows best practices for information architecture. And WordPress offers tons of SEO plugins that just work out of the box. They can help you optimize your websites for search engines. If you just search in the WordPress repository, you'll see over 50 pages of results for SEO. And then for content marketers, many of these plugins, they help writers optimize their content in real time while they're writing it. These plugins also check important factors that you need to bear in mind as you look to optimize your content, like keyword density, heading structure, and word count, just to name a few. And then some of those plugins offer easy to manage metadata and schema so that you can optimize for search engines. And WordPress itself provides an out-of-the-box solution for optimizing your images with the WebP format. And then you have all the tons of integrations with social platforms and other sharing techniques, and that'll help increase your website's footprint on the web as well as your content. And then WordPress is built for performance. Speed ranking is a huge factor for SEO. So there's hundreds of plugins focused on performance. And as your site becomes more complex, performance will also become more critical for you because you want to improve your page experience and by proxy, help boost your rankings.
That is music to content marketers' ears, sure. Harry, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
And definitely, I appreciate you having me, and this was a great conversation.